I stood frozen for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds. That was how long my billionaire husband stared at my hand on his arm, before he leaned down and whispered something that shattered 8 years of marriage. Never touch me in public. The words hit harder than a slap. My fingers instantly loosened. The champagne glass nearly slipped from my hand. And around us, people kept laughing. The orchestra kept playing. The crystal chandeliers kept sparkling. No one noticed that my marriage had just died. Tell me honestly, if your husband said that to you in front of hundreds of people, would you stay? Because I did. At least for another 12 hours. And that was my biggest mistake. The charity gala was being held inside one of the most luxurious hotels in Manhattan. Every major business family was there. Politicians, investors, media executives, women in designer gowns, men worth hundreds of millions. And standing in the center of it all was my husband, Vincent Ashford, the man everyone admired, the man financial magazines called a genius, the man who spent 8 years convincing me I should be grateful simply to stand beside him. I watched him from across the ballroom. People surrounded him, laughing at every joke, listening to every word. Meanwhile, I stood alone near the wall, exactly where he preferred me, visible enough to complete the image, invisible enough not to distract from it. That had been my role for years. Smile. Nod. Look beautiful. Stay quiet. I used to think marriage was a partnership. Vincent taught me otherwise. To him, I was an accessory, a carefully selected piece of decoration. No different from the expensive art hanging in our mansion. The worst part? I didn't realize how much of myself I had lost until that night. The limousine ride there should have warned me. The entire 30-minute trip passed without Vincent looking at me once. Not once. His eyes stayed glued to his phone. His assistant called 3 times. He answered all 3. I sat beside him. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't mention my dress. Didn't even acknowledge my existence. When the car stopped, he stepped out first. As always. I followed several feet behind. As always. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. I just kept pretending not to see them. The emerald dress I wore that night was beautiful. I remember that. I remember spending nearly an hour getting ready, pinning my hair, choosing jewelry, trying to look like the woman I thought my husband wanted. And none of it mattered. Because when I finally touched his arm on that balcony, the expression on his face looked almost disgusted. Like I had embarrassed him. Like affection from his wife was something shameful. Something to hide. Never touch me in public. I kept hearing it. Again. And again. And again. The words followed me through every conversation afterward. The Harrisons introduced themselves. I smiled. Someone complimented my dress. I smiled. A woman asked how Vincent and I met. I smiled. Inside, something was breaking. Quietly. Completely. By the time we got home, I already knew. I just hadn't admitted it yet. The mansion was dark when we returned. 8 bedrooms. 12 bathrooms. 2 grand staircases. A house people envied. A house that had never once felt like home. Vincent walked straight toward his office. No good night. No conversation. No explanation. Nothing. The study door closed behind him. And suddenly the entire house felt silent. I stood in our bedroom still wearing my gown. Still wearing my wedding ring. Still pretending everything was fine. Then I looked into the mirror. And I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back looked exhausted. Not physically. Spiritually. Like someone who had spent years shrinking herself. Years apologizing for taking up space. Years trying to earn love that should never have required earning. I sat on the edge of the bed. Then I started crying. Not because of what Vincent said. Because of what I finally understood. He wasn't going to change. And if I stayed, neither would I. At 3:47 in the morning, I pulled a suitcase from the closet. My hands stopped shaking. Something strange happened. The moment I decided to leave, I felt calm. For the first time in years. I packed clothes. A few books. Personal documents. Nothing expensive. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to start over. As sunrise painted the sky pink and gold, I grabbed a sheet of paper. I wrote one sentence. I am tired of being invisible. I am leaving. Then I folded it, placed it on the nightstand, removed my wedding ring, and left it beside the note. No speech. No screaming. No revenge. Just silence. The same silence Vincent had given me for 8 years. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. The taxi driver loaded my suitcase into the trunk. Where to? He asked. I looked back at the mansion, then looked away. Anywhere but here. The first few weeks were terrifying. I won't lie. Freedom sounds romantic until you realize freedom also comes with bills. Rent. Groceries. Uncertainty. I checked into a small hotel, then rented a tiny studio apartment. The entire apartment could probably fit inside one of Vincent's guest bedrooms. And somehow, it felt bigger. Because it belonged to me. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout noodles from a paper container. No servants. No luxury. No marble floors. No designer furniture. Just me. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. 5 months later, my life looked completely different. The apartment was still small. But now there were books everywhere. Plants on the windowsill. Photos of old friends I had reconnected with. Pieces of myself returning. One by one. Finding work wasn't easy. 8 years away from teaching had left huge gaps on my resume. Interview after interview ended with polite rejections. But I kept going. Because unlike before, I wasn't living for someone else's approval anymore. Then one afternoon I found an opening at a non-profit educational foundation. Meridian Education Trust. Something about it felt right. I spent hours crafting my application. Every sentence came from the version of myself I thought I had lost. The teacher. The dreamer. The woman who believed education could change lives. For weeks later my phone rang. Hello, this is Julian Clark. That phone call changed everything. The interview lasted more than 3 hours. But it didn't feel like an interview. It felt like being seen. Julian listened. Actually listened. When I spoke, he didn't interrupt. When I explained my ideas, he asked questions. When I described my goals, he took notes. By the end, I almost forgot I was being evaluated. Then he smiled. When can you start? I blinked. Are you offering me the job? I absolutely am. I walked out of that building trying not to cry. Because after years of feeling invisible, someone had finally looked at me and seen value. Not beauty. Not status. Not who I was married to. Me. The work transformed my life. Every day I helped teachers. Designed programs. Visited schools. Built something meaningful. And slowly, I started becoming myself again. Then there was Julian. At first he was just my boss. Then a mentor. Then a friend. And eventually, something more. Not because he rescued me. Because he respected me. There's a difference. A huge difference. One evening we were having dinner after work. He asked what happened to my marriage. I told him the truth. Most of it. When I finished, he sat quietly for several seconds. Then he said something I'll never forget. Real love never asks someone to become smaller. I stared at him. Because Vincent had spent 8 years doing exactly that. Making me smaller. Quieter. Less visible. Less ambitious. Less myself. And suddenly I realized how wrong I'd been about love. Months passed. The foundation flourished. So did I. Then one evening everything collided. A business networking event downtown. Hundreds of attendees. Media. Executives. Investors. And Vincent. I saw him before he saw me. He looked exactly the same. Perfect suit. Perfect hair. Perfect posture. But something was different. Lonelier. Then his eyes found mine. And froze. I was standing beside Julian. Laughing. Genuinely laughing. The way I used to before marriage taught me to be careful with joy. Vincent started walking toward us. Fast. Too fast. I already knew this conversation was coming. The moment he reached us, the room felt smaller. Ella. Vincent. Julian politely introduced himself. The two men shook hands. And immediately measured each other. Vincent looked at Julian like an enemy. Julian looked at Vincent like a human being. That difference told me everything. Then Vincent turned to me. You have a job now? I almost laughed. 5 months of rebuilding my life. And that was his first question. Yes. You never needed to work. There it was. The old Vincent. The one who believed money solved everything. The point wasn't money, I said. His jaw tightened. Then what was the point? I held his gaze. For the first time in years, I matter. Silence. Real silence. The kind that makes people uncomfortable. Because everyone knows the truth has just entered the room. Vincent looked away first. Not me. For 8 years it had always been me. Not anymore. Julian quietly excused himself to give us privacy. The moment he left, Vincent spoke again. I miss you. I believed him. The problem was, it didn't matter anymore. Do you? I asked softly. Yes. Or do you miss having me? That landed hard. His face changed instantly. Because he knew exactly what I meant. For the first time, Vincent had no script. No control. No power. Only consequences. I stepped closer. Do you remember what you said to me at the gala? He looked down. Yeah. Do you remember? His silence answered. I nodded. Good. Then I told him the truth. The truth I should have spoken years earlier. You gave me luxury. You gave me comfort. You gave me a mansion. But you never gave me respect. Every word landed like a hammer. You never celebrated my dreams. You never valued my opinions. You never treated me like an equal. His eyes reddened. I kept going. Because for 8 years I had stayed quiet. Not anymore. You didn't lose me because of one sentence on a balcony. You lost me because that sentence revealed who you had been all along. The pain on his face was real. For the first time. Actually real. I can change, he said. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But change isn't a promise. Change is proof. And by then it was too late. You don't want me back because you love me. His shoulders stiffened. You want me back because someone else sees my value. That was the moment everything clicked. For him. For me. For both of us. He finally understood. And so did I. The marriage was over. Not legally. Emotionally. Spiritually. Completely. I'm sorry, he whispered. This time he meant it. I could hear it. I could feel it. And somehow that made it harder. Because genuine regret arrived years too late. I know, I said quietly. And I forgive you. His eyes widened. But I'm still leaving. We stood there for several seconds. Two people who once promised forever. Now standing at the edge of goodbye. Finally he nodded. Slowly. Painfully. Accepting reality. Then this is goodbye. This is goodbye. When I turned around, Julian was waiting. Not demanding. Not possessive. Not controlling. Just waiting. Like an equal. Like a partner. Like someone who understood that love is a choice. Not ownership. I walked toward him. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel invisible. Months later the divorce became official. Vincent signed without a fight. I kept nothing except my freedom. And somehow, that felt like everything. My relationship with Julian grew naturally. No rusing. No pressure. No games. One evening we sat on my tiny balcony watching the sunset. The city glowed orange and gold. Julian took my hand. Gently. Not because he owned it. Because I offered it. Ella, he said softly. I need you to know something. I looked at him. I will never ask you to become smaller. My eyes filled instantly. Because 8 years earlier, that was all I had wanted. To be myself. Yes. To be enough? A smile touched his lips. You've always been enough. Then he kissed me. Not like a man claiming something. Like a man honoring something. And in that moment I finally understood. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. Vincent never hated me. He simply stopped seeing me. Julian saw me. But the most important person who finally saw me was myself. A year later I ran into Vincent one last time at a small coffee shop. He looked healthier. Calmer. Different. Therapy had changed him. Regret had changed him. Life had changed him. He wasn't the same man anymore. Neither was I. For a moment our eyes met. Then I smiled. He lifted his coffee cup. A silent goodbye. A silent apology. A silent acceptance. Then Julian squeezed my hand. I laughed at something he said. And we walked away together. Not because I needed him. Because I chose him. And as the city lights came alive around us, I realized something beautiful. The greatest love story of my life wasn't finding the right man. It was finding myself again after years of disappearing. And once I finally did, no one would ever make me invisible again. $202 million. That was the contract my billionaire boss threatened to lose if I attended my sister's wedding. 5 years. That's how long I spent working 62 to 72 hours a week for him. 5 years of canceled vacations. 5 years of missed birthdays. 5 years of answering midnight calls. 5 years of being treated like a machine instead of a human being. Then, at 8:03 p.m. on a Friday night, he looked me straight in the eye and said something that changed both of our lives. Be here tomorrow at 8. Tomorrow was my sister's wedding. And apparently, that didn't matter. I stared at him across my desk. The office was nearly empty. Most of the lights on our floor had already shut off automatically. The cleaning crew had started vacuuming the far end of the building. My eyes burned from 12 straight hours of reviewing contracts. My shoulders felt like concrete. My stomach growled loud enough that I was grateful he couldn't hear it. But none of that compared to the anger suddenly rising inside me. Tomorrow is Saturday. My voice came out calm. Too calm. I know. He crossed his arms. The Tanaka proposal must be completed before Monday. I blinked. Tomorrow is my sister's wedding. His expression didn't change. Not even slightly. I approved that leave 5 months ago. Plans changed. That was it. Just 3 words. Plans changed. Like my life meant nothing. Like my family meant nothing. Like Iris's wedding was just another calendar entry he could erase. I felt something crack. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. The kind of crack that forms after years of pressure. Years of swallowing frustration. Years of telling myself things would get better. Years of defending a man who never once defended me. Then I guess the company should have planned better. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Silence. The entire office froze. A keyboard stopped clicking. Someone near the break room nearly dropped a coffee mug. My boss slowly turned around. Jameson Prescott was not a man people challenged. Ever. At 36, he had built a multi-billion-dollar empire from nothing. Investors feared him. Competitors hated him. Employees obeyed him. Immediately. Without question. Including me. At least until tonight. What did you say? His voice was low. Dangerously low. I stood. My hands shook. My knees shook. But my voice didn't. I said I'm not missing my sister's wedding. His eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake. No. I grabbed my purse. For once I'm correcting one. If you were sitting where I was that night, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Would you have obeyed? Or would you have walked away from the highest paying job of your life? Because I chose the last option. And I had no idea what it was about to cost me. Or what it would eventually give me. Jameson took one step closer. You're being emotional. I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time all evening. Emotional. I pointed toward the dark office around us. I've worked 62 hours this week. I held up another finger. 71 last week. Another. I missed Christmas dinner. Another. My mother's birthday. Another. My best friend's engagement party. I stared directly into his eyes. And tomorrow you want me to miss my sister's wedding? My throat tightened. But I kept going. You know what the difference is? He said nothing. She actually loves me. The silence hit harder than shouting. Something flickered across his face. For half a second. Gone before I could identify it. Then his expression hardened again. If you're not here tomorrow morning. He paused. The ultimatum hanging between us. Don't bother coming back Monday. There it was. The threat. The final card. The move that had always worked before. Except this time. I was tired. Tired enough to stop being afraid. I unplugged my laptop. Closed it. Picked up the framed photo sitting on my desk. Iris and me. Age 12 and 16. Covered in sand. Laughing on a beach. A memory from before life became complicated. Before ambition became a prison. Before Jameson Prescott became the center of my existence. What are you doing? His voice sounded different now. Less confident. I slipped the photo into my bag. You gave me a choice. I met his gaze. Obey or leave. Then I smiled. A real smile. The first one I'd had all day. I choose leave. The elevator doors opened behind me. I stepped inside. Jameson moved forward. Fast. Too fast. As if he'd suddenly realized something. Amelia. The way he said my name made my chest tighten. Not an order. Not a command. Something else. Something almost desperate. You can't just walk away. I stepped backward into the elevator. Yes. The doors started closing. I can. Then the doors sealed shut. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't his assistant anymore. I was just me. The elevator descended 42 floors. My reflection stared back from the mirrored wall. My pulse hammered. My hands trembled. My stomach twisted. I had no job. No backup plan. No idea what came next. But somehow, I felt lighter. Like I'd finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying for years. When I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. One message. Jameson. 2 words. Come back. I stared at the screen. Then deleted it. And walked away. I didn't know it then. But 42 floors above me, the man who had just ordered me to choose between my career and my family was standing at his office window, watching me disappear, and realizing he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Can we talk? I stared out the apartment window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. The city looked gray, uncertain, a lot like my future. There's nothing left to say. That's not true. His voice sounded tired, not physically tired. The kind of tired that comes when someone hasn't slept, hasn't stopped thinking, hasn't stopped regretting. I hated that I noticed. I hated that I cared. Amelia. There it was again. That tone. Not boss. Not CEO. Just Jameson. And somehow that made everything harder. What? Meet me once. No. 20 minutes. No. 10. I rolled my eyes. You're negotiating. It's what I do. Despite myself, I almost smiled. He caught it. I could hear it in his voice. Was that a laugh? No. It was definitely a laugh. I hung up. Immediately. Before he could hear the smile forming. Before I could admit how much I'd missed hearing his voice. The phone rang again. I rejected it. It rang again. Rejected. Again. Rejected. Finally a text appeared. 1 coffee. No pressure. No arguments. No ultimatums. I owe you that much. I stared at the message. Then another arrived. Please. That stupid word again. Please. The man who used to order entire executive teams around with a single look was suddenly begging me for coffee. I should have ignored him. Instead, I agreed. 3 words. Tomorrow. 1 coffee. The second I sent it, my stomach flipped. Because deep down I knew. This wasn't closure. Not really. The next day I arrived early. Mostly because I was nervous. The coffee shop sat 3 blocks from Prescott Global Headquarters. A place we'd both visited hundreds of times. Except usually I was carrying his coffee, not meeting him as an equal. When I walked inside, he was already there. Of course he was. Jameson was never late. For anything. The moment he saw me he stood. Actually stood. For me. That alone nearly broke my brain. For 5 years he'd barely looked up from emails. Now he looked like he'd been counting every second until I arrived. You came. The relief in his voice sounded genuine. Dangerously genuine. I sat down. 30 minutes. His mouth twitched. Still negotiating. Don't push it. A waitress arrived. Without asking, she placed a coffee in front of me. Cream. 1 sugar. Exactly how I liked it. I stared at the cup, then at Jameson. You remembered. Something softened in his expression. I remember everything. My pulse betrayed me. Traitor. I wrapped both hands around the cup, trying to stay focused, trying to remember every reason I should walk away. So talk. He nodded, then surprised me. Immediately. I was wrong. No excuses. No explanations. No blame shifting. Just that. I was wrong. Silence stretched between us. Because somehow I hadn't prepared for that. You were. I know. You treated me terribly. I know. You humiliated me. His jaw tightened. I know. I looked away. Because suddenly I wasn't angry anymore. Just sad. 5 years. 5 years wasted. 5 years trying to earn appreciation that should have been freely given. I kept waiting. His eyes lifted. For what? For one day. My voice cracked. One day where you would notice. The pain that crossed his face looked real. I noticed. Then why didn't you say anything? He looked down. For the first time since I'd met him, Jameson Prescott looked ashamed. And that was almost more shocking than the apology. You want the truth? Yes. I was afraid. I blinked. What? A bitter laugh escaped him. I know how ridiculous that sounds. Try me. He stared into his coffee, then finally spoke. Every important person in my life eventually left. The words came slowly, like they hurt. My father. Pause. My mother. Pause. Business partners. Another pause. So I built rules. I frowned. What kind of rules? Never need anyone. His smile looked painful. Never depend on anyone. Then his eyes found mine. Never love anyone. My heartbeat stumbled. Because suddenly things made sense. Not everything. But enough. Enough to see the man behind the armor. The man I'd spent years working beside. The man nobody else ever seemed to notice. I didn't push you away because you weren't important. His voice dropped. I pushed you away because you were. The words landed directly in my chest. And I hated how much they affected me. Jameson, when you walked out. He interrupted softly. Everything stopped. I swallowed. He continued. The office stopped working. A small smile touched my lips. That's dramatic. No. His gaze never left mine. That's the truth. Then he leaned forward. And everything changed. Amelia. My breath caught. You are the first person I've ever trusted. The coffee shop disappeared. The noise. The conversations. The music. Everything faded, leaving only those words. And the man sitting across from me. A man I thought I knew. A man who suddenly felt like a stranger. A stranger I wanted to understand. Which was probably the most dangerous thing of all. Because at that exact moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't over him. Not even close. And for the first time since walking away, that possibility scared me more than unemployment ever could. I wasn't over him. Not even close. And judging by the look in his eyes, neither was he. The realization sat between us. Heavy. Dangerous. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I pushed my chair back. I need time. Jameson nodded immediately. No argument. No pressure. No manipulation. Just acceptance. Take all the time you need. That surprised me more than anything else. The old Jameson would have pushed. Demanded. Controlled. This version simply let me go. Again. And somehow that hurt. Because it proved he really was changing. The next 2 weeks were torture. Not because of Jameson. Because of myself. Every interview felt wrong. Every company felt wrong. Every office felt wrong. I kept comparing everything to Prescott Global. The pace. The people. The challenges. The excitement. The truth was embarrassing. I loved the work. I always had. I just hated the way I'd been treated. Then the offers started arriving. 3 companies. For interviews. 2 executive assistant positions. 1 operations manager role. All respectable. All safe. None of them felt right. Then my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Jameson. It was Olivia, the CFO of Prescott Global. Amelia. Her voice sounded exhausted. We need help. I frowned. What happened? Silence. Then, everything. My stomach tightened. Start talking. The Tanaka contract. Iset Oplights. What about it? It collapsed. My pulse jumped. The Tanaka deal was worth over $200 million. One of the biggest contracts in company history. How? No one knows. She sighed. The proposal contained major errors. I froze. Errors? Impossible. I personally reviewed every version before leaving. Unless. A thought hit me. Hard. Who finished it after I left? Another pause. Then. 3 different teams. There it was. The problem. Too many people. No central control. No coordination. Exactly the chaos I'd spent 5 years preventing. How bad is it? Bad. I could hear papers moving. Voices in the background. Stress. Panic. The client suspended negotiations. I closed my eyes. Mostly because I was nervous. The coffee shop sat 3 blocks from Prescott Global headquarters. A place we'd both visited hundreds of times. Except usually I was carrying his coffee, not meeting him as an equal. When I walked inside, he was already there. Of course he was. Jameson was never late. For anything. The moment he saw me he stood. Actually stood. For me. That alone nearly broke my brain. For 5 years he'd barely looked up from emails. Now he looked like he'd been counting every second until I arrived. You came. The relief in his voice sounded genuine. Dangerously genuine. I sat down. 30 minutes. His mouth twitched. Still negotiating. Don't push it. A waitress arrived. Without asking, she placed a coffee in front of me. Cream. 1 sugar. Exactly how I liked it. I stared at the cup. Then at Jameson. You remembered. Something softened in his expression. I remember everything. My pulse betrayed me. Traitor. I wrapped both hands around the cup. Trying to stay focused. Trying to remember every reason I should walk away. So talk. He nodded. Then surprised me. Immediately. I was wrong. No excuses. No explanations. No blame shifting. Just that. I was wrong. Silence stretched between us. Because somehow I hadn't prepared for that. You were. I know. You treated me terribly. I know. You humiliated me. His jaw tightened. I know. I looked away. Because suddenly I wasn't angry anymore. Just sad. 5 years. 5 years wasted. 5 years trying to earn appreciation that should have been freely given. I kept waiting. His eyes lifted. For what? For 1 day. My voice cracked. 1 day where you would notice. The pain that crossed his face looked real. I noticed. Then why didn't you say anything? He looked down. For the first time since I'd met him, Jameson Prescott looked ashamed. And that was almost more shocking than the apology. You want the truth? Yes. I was afraid. I blinked. What? A bitter laugh escaped him. I know how ridiculous that sounds. Try me. He stared into his coffee, then finally spoke. Every important person in my life eventually left. The words came slowly, like they hurt. My father. Pause. My mother. Pause. Business partners. Another pause. So I built rules. I frowned. What kind of rules? Never need anyone. His smile looked painful. Never depend on anyone. Then his eyes found mine. Never love anyone. My heartbeat stumbled. Because suddenly things made sense. Not everything. But enough. Enough to see the man behind the armor. The man I'd spent years working beside. The man nobody else ever seemed to notice. I didn't push you away because you weren't important. His voice dropped. I pushed you away because you were. The words landed directly in my chest. And I hated how much they affected me. Jameson, when you walked out. He interrupted softly. Everything stopped. I swallowed. He continued. The office stopped working. A small smile touched my lips. That's dramatic. No. His gaze never left mine. That's the truth. Then he leaned forward. And everything changed. Amelia. My breath caught. You are the first person I've ever trusted. The coffee shop disappeared. The noise. The conversations. The music. Everything faded, leaving only those words. And the man sitting across from me. A man I thought I knew. A man who suddenly felt like a stranger. A stranger I wanted to understand. Which was probably the most dangerous thing of all. Because at that exact moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't over him. Not even close. And for the first time since walking away, that possibility scared me more than unemployment ever could. I wasn't over him. Not even close. And judging by the look in his eyes, neither was he. The realization sat between us. Heavy. Dangerous. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I pushed my chair back. I need time. Jameson nodded immediately. No argument. No pressure. No manipulation. Just acceptance. Take all the time you need. That surprised me more than anything else. The old Jameson would have pushed. Demanded. Controlled. This version simply let me go. Again. And somehow that hurt. Because it proved he really was changing. The next 2 weeks were torture. Not because of Jameson. Because of myself. Every interview felt wrong. Every company felt wrong. Every office felt wrong. I kept comparing everything to Prescott Global. The pace. The people. The challenges. The excitement. The truth was embarrassing. I loved the work. I always had. I just hated the way I'd been treated. Then the offers started arriving. 3 companies. For interviews. 2 executive assistant positions. 1 operations manager role. All respectable. All safe. None of them felt right. Then my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Jameson. It was Olivia. The CFO of Prescott Global. Amelia. Her voice sounded exhausted. We need help. I frowned. What happened? Silence. Then. Everything. My stomach tightened. Start talking. The Tanaka contract. Iset Oplights. What about it? It collapsed. My pulse jumped. The Tanaka deal was worth over $200 million. One of the biggest contracts in company history. How? No one knows. She sighed. The proposal contained major errors. I froze. Errors? Impossible. I personally reviewed every version before leaving. Unless. A thought hit me. Hard. Who finished it after I left? Another pause. Then. 3 different teams. There it was. The problem. Too many people. No central control. No coordination. Exactly the chaos I'd spent 5 years preventing. How bad is it? Bad. I could hear papers moving. Voices in the background. Stress. Panic. The client suspended negotiations. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to. He waited. Patiently. Eventually I looked up. Big mistake. Because the way he was looking at me should have been illegal. None of this is your fault. His voice softened. You trusted someone. That was stupid. No. His hand brushed mine. Barely. But electricity exploded through me anyway. That was human. The room felt smaller. Warmer. Dangerous. Jameson. No. He took another step. Close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The worry. The fear. The love. And that last one terrified me. Because it was real. Completely real. Do you know what the worst part of this week was? I swallowed. What? His laugh sounded hollow. For 5 days I thought I lost everything. The company. The contracts. The reputation. The future. Everything. Then his gaze dropped to my hand. And slowly returned to my eyes. Then I realized none of that scared me. My heartbeat accelerated. Fast. Too fast. Jameson. The thing that scared me. His voice cracked. Actually cracked. I thought I'd lost you. Silence. Pure silence. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't move. Because this wasn't manipulation. Wasn't charm. Wasn't strategy. It was truth. Raw truth. And truth is a dangerous thing. Especially when you've spent years wanting to hear it. He stepped closer. One final step. No space left between us. Amelia. The way he said my name made my knees weak. I love you. There it was. No hesitation. No fear. No games. Just love. Honest. Simple. Terrifying. And the worst part? I loved him too. I had for a long time. Longer than I wanted to admit. Longer than I could explain. Maybe from the beginning. Maybe from somewhere in the middle. Maybe from the moment I realized I saw parts of him nobody else did. I don't know. What I did know was that I was done running. Done pretending. Done hiding behind logic. So I stood. Grabbed his tie. Pulled him down. And kissed him. Hard. All the frustration. All the anger. All the months apart. All the sleepless nights. Everything exploded at once. His arms wrapped around my waist instantly. Like he'd been waiting years. Maybe he had. The kiss deepened. Dangerous. Desperate. Necessary. And when we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing like we'd run a marathon, Jameson rested his forehead against mine. A slow smile appeared. The kind I'd never seen before. The kind that belonged to a man completely in love. And that's when I made a decision. Not about the company. Not about Trevor. Not about my career. About us. Because after everything we'd survived, I wasn't walking away again. And 3 months later, in front of the entire board of directors, Jameson Prescott shocked everyone by making an announcement nobody saw coming. 8 months later, the company gala was in full swing. The Prescott Global Ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and hundreds of the city's most influential business leaders. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. Everyone was talking about the mysterious engagement announcement. And there we were. Jameson Prescott and me, Amelia Roberts, standing side by side. 8 months ago, I had walked away. 5 years of stress, manipulation, and emotional exhaustion had culminated in one terrifying elevator ride. I had chosen myself that night. And now here I was, no longer just an assistant. No longer invisible. I wore a deep sapphire gown fitted perfectly. Hair pinned with subtle elegance. Jewelry simple but sparkling under the lights. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. Some admiring. Some envious. Some quietly judging. And at the center of it all was Jameson. Tall. Commanding. Powerful. But beside him now, the power balance had shifted. He looked at me, really looked at me, like I was the person he'd finally realized mattered the most. The board members, investors, even the press. Everyone had assumed this was another flashy announcement for PR. But they didn't know the truth. This engagement wasn't about optics. It was about respect. Partnership. Hard-earned love. When Jameson took my hand, the crowd hushed. I want everyone to see, he said quietly so only I could hear. Not because we have to, but because I want them to know I've learned what it means to value someone fully. I squeezed his hand. And in that instant, I remembered every late night, every impossible deadline, every insult carefully hidden behind professionalism. All of it had led to this moment. I leaned slightly toward him and whispered, I never thought this day would come. He smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. Neither did I. But here we are. The photographer snapped pictures. Flashes illuminated the room. I could see expressions everywhere. Shock, jealousy, respect, admiration. Jameson bent down slightly. A private smile shared just between us. 8 months, Amelia, he said. 8 months since you walked out. 8 months of realizing I can't imagine a day without you. I felt my chest tighten. Yes, I whispered back. And I can't imagine going back. Because we had both changed. I had fought for my dignity, my life, my freedom. And he had fought to understand love beyond control and power. When he knelt, right there in the middle of the gala, I knew the cameras would capture it. I knew the headlines. But none of it mattered. Because this moment was ours. The diamond ring sparkled under the lights. The crowd gasped. I took a deep breath. And said the word that sealed everything. Yes. The applause erupted. Journalists captured every second. Board members looked on stunned. But I didn't hear any of it. I only felt his hands on mine, his eyes locking with mine. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly who I was. Amelia Roberts. Seen, valued, respected, loved. And as Jameson lifted me in a private spin beneath the chandeliers, I realized the story wasn't about walking away from a boss. It was about walking toward myself. Because the greatest victories aren't always in contracts or promotions. Sometimes they're in claiming your own worth. And once you do that, everything else falls into place. We stood there together, partners in life, in love, in business. The past was behind us. The future was ours. And nothing, no betrayal, no manipulation, no threat, could make me invisible again. We had both found our way back. And this time, there was no turning back. No compromise. No hiding. Only a partnership built on trust, respect, and love that had been earned through fire. Finally, I was free. Finally, I was seen. And finally, I was ready to live a life that was entirely mine.